Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Infuse Your Future podcast, where we bring together people and ideas that are making the world a better place. I'm your host, Dr. C, and I'm super excited to speak with my guest today, Navi Bliss from Navi Bliss Coaching, who's just an amazing person and has a lot of great things to say. So without further ado, hi, Navi.
Hi, Carla. It's so nice to be here, and thank you so much for having me on the show. And a big hello to your audience.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do in the world, how you infuse people's lives.
Yeah, so I'm a love and confidence coach and an inspirational speaker and an author. And my mission in life is to help people to fall head over heels in love with themselves so that they can effortlessly attract the life and love of their dreams, that they can feel good in their own skin every single day and go out and live in the world with all of their boldness, with all of their audacity, and really create meaningful change in the world because I believe that playing small serves nobody. And especially for women, I mean, for everyone, but especially for women, we're taught to be humble. And this is something that is pushed on us. And I don't think that it serves anyone to be humble because that keeps you playing small. And everyone has passion, ideas, things that they need to be doing out into the world. And when you are playing small, you are not living up to your potential. You have the power to do incredible things. You just have to believe in yourself in order to be able to do those things. So it is my passion to help people to find that confidence within themselves so that they can live their best lives and do the work that they're supposed to do in the world and also attract the love that they want in their lives.
That sounds great. We definitely need a lot more love in the world.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to play big and be humble at the same time?
So I don't think that it's necessary to be humble. So the thing is, I always, because people try or have this idea that confidence is the same as arrogance. And I say that it's the complete opposite. Because when you're a confident person, you're walking into a room and you're just showing up as your full self, which actually allows you to be present in those conversations that you're having with people, the interactions that you're having in the world. And an arrogant person, that actually doesn't come from a place of real confidence. It comes from low self esteem. So they have to inflate their ego and present this outside exterior. And when an arrogant person is walking into a room, they're comparing themselves to every single person and they're not present in that moment. And they're thinking, okay, I'm better than this person. And they have to tear down people. Whereas I think true confidence just is actually allows you to be present in the moment and show up in your full authenticity. And there is no comparison. So it's just thinking I'm fabulous and this person is fabulous in their own way and this person is fabulous in their own way. And because I'm really centered in my own confidence and fabulousness, that I am open to receive that of all of the other people around me.
Wow, that is so beautifully put. I don't know if I've heard it explained so beautifully before.
Yeah, it's just one of those things because I feel like that if you're holding on to this idea that you have to be humble or you have to play small, you can't fully step into your confidence, right? But the thing is, like, even if you look in the world, like if you go online and you look, who are the people that are critiquing other people? They're the people that are unhappy with themselves, right? If you're happy with yourself and you're living your fullest best life, you don't have time for that. Even if you disagree with somebody, you're going to unplug and turn in a different direction. You're not going to come in there and project your hate. If you're doing that, it's because you need to have a sense of control or superiority over that person.
Yeah. And you feel a different energy, right? I mean, when you're with a confident person, you feel good. Like they lift you up. At least this is true for me. When I'm with a person who really is confident in themselves and believes in themselves, it just almost this natural energy that kind of helps me be confident and believe in myself. Whereas
Yeah,
when you're with an arrogant person, it's almost the opposite effect. It's almost like a closing energy versus an opening energy. And I feel like it can be very fun to be around confident people.
yeah, no, absolutely. And the reason that it's that they help you to feel confident is, one is that sort of energy is contagious, right? Just like like positivity is contagious, negativity is contagious, whatever energy that someone is in is contagious. But the other thing is that they're able to receive you. What is a better gift that you can give to anybody than to receive them, than to be present with them in that moment, even if it's just a fleeting interaction that you're having with them. If you can give them your full presence where you're not thinking about other things like critiquing them or comparing yourself to them, but you can just listen to what they're saying, what better gift can you ever give anybody?
Right. So is that mainly what you do? When you coach someone, you work with them on elevating their confidence level?
Yeah, that's the basis of all of my work, right? And that's why I call myself a love and confidence coach. And what I realized is I started with just relationship coaching and helping people to attract the love that they wanted. And then I realized that I had clients that ended up getting into the relationships that they wanted, and they wanted to keep working with me because they wanted to infuse that confidence into other areas of their life, into their career, into their business. And it's all the same. The magnetism is the same. Um and I think that it's just about, when you show up in your authenticity, that is when you're your most attractive. That's actually the highest vibration out there. So people think it's happiness or it's joy. It's actually authenticity. And that will bring everything to you that is meant to be in your life when you show up in your authenticity.
So true. And I feel like you're the type of coach that's most needed in the world because as the internet and all the TikToks and YouTube videos and basically any type of screen, as they become more and more prevalent, we're losing the ability to have relationships. We're losing the ability to be with each other and hold space for each other and celebrate each other. And so I feel like it's becoming more and more important to have people out there that are teaching people how to be in a relationship um, with others and especially with themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe that perfectionism is the antithesis to connection, and that you can't ever connect with anybody that's perfect. And I always say my superpower in life is actually that I'm not afraid to suck at things. Because one, I can only get better by doing things that I suck at, because every single thing in my life, the first time I did it, if you listen, I have my own podcast. If you listen to my first episode, when I listen to it, I want to cringe. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. But I didn't get better by not doing it. And the thing is, I know that there are people that listen to it and they still get value from it, which is why I won't take it down. And I'm not afraid to show my own growth as a person. I'm not afraid to show when I mess up, and I've had instances as a speaker where I've been up on a stage. One of my biggest fears was, what if I forget what I'm saying? It happened to me once. I had a mic that failed, and I ended up having to start a speech over, and I forgot part of it. And in that moment, of course, I felt like I wanted to run off the stage and cry, but I didn't. And I finished it. And what I realized is two things. One, I didn't die. Two, people still got value from that. And I would say perhaps even more value than if I hadn't forgotten it, because I showed my humanness. And by showing up in my authenticity, having the courage to be there, like every single time I do that, I know that I give someone else the courage to be able to do that and realize that it's going to be okay.
I'm really so glad that you said that because I don't know why. I don't know who taught me this or why I learned it, but growing up, I got the message that you can't make mistakes. And then, of course, I went into medicine where, I mean, you never want to make a mistake, right? Because even if you make one mistake in a million tasks, I mean, the mistake to that one person is a big deal, right?
It is, but if you think of even in that, right? I mean, I'm sure with your experience in medicine that how many doctors like make more mistakes in trying to cover up a mistake that they made rather than if they just acknowledged it. I'm sure most people have had that experience when it comes to medical professionals.
So true, so true. And one of the things that I loved about getting into coaching was that they teach you that it's okay to make mistakes. And so much like you, I've decided to keep all of my initial podcasts up for the same reason. I want to say, yeah, it's not a big deal that I sucked in the beginning. Um, I mean, it used to be that I would just put out an episode and I would never listen to it again. But one time I went back and listened to the first few, and there's one topic that I mention almost every single time. And I'm like, oh my God, it sounds like all I do is talk about this one thing. I gotta diversify and not mention it again. And Pat Flynn is one of my favorite podcasters from the Smart Passive Income. And he was the one that gave me that idea. He talked on one of his podcasts about his first podcast and how horrible it was. And he didn't do another one for, I think it was like a year. And he just left it up. And I thought that was just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's our ability to, I really believe that it's our ability to just show up in the world. And if you actually look at people that in the world, if you were sort of as an analysis, not as a comparison, but who project this image of perfection, most of them are not in happy relationships. Most of their relationships crumble. And I would say that it's because that people have a hard time connecting with them. People are going to connect to your humanness. They're not going to connect to your perfection, because everyone has that in them, even if it's different, right? Even if someone else's difficulties or mistakes or whatever you want to call it are different than yours, we all have those, right? And so if that's what makes you relatable to people.
Right. And I'm so glad you mentioned connection. Actually, the podcast that's coming up next week is all about connection. That's almost all we talk about is connection. And going back to what you were saying about not being afraid to fail, if you think about every single person who has been successful has failed. Brene Brown, when you were talking about your failure of the microphone and forgetting your speech, in one of her books, she talks about how the very first time she had a speaking gig, I think it was, she just totally bombed. But she got back up and did it again. And now, I mean, she's a famous author. She's brought so much value to the world. And it was because she didn't crawl into a hole after what she felt was an embarrassing situation, which, even when we fail at stuff, we do help people somehow. First of all, we help ourselves because we've just learned something. We haven't really failed. We either gain experience or we gain success or something like that. I forget exactly how that goes, but
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. That's actually why I got into speaking, to be honest with you, because so my past is, I have a very traumatic past. I was physically and emotionally abused by my mother as a child. And so my self-esteem from the beginning was absolute garbage. And I it took me a long time to develop healthy self-esteem as an adult, which is why when I did it, because after the the abuse that I had as a child, I ended up in domestic violence relationships, um and then I realized, okay, none of it was my fault, but I can't change anyone else, and the only thing I can control is what I allow into my life. And I just realized that after I walked away from the second relationship, and I basically got out by the skin of my teeth, that I was like, this can't ever happen again. It can't ever happen again. So I have to figure this out. I have to heal. And when I got to a place when I realized how different I felt about myself, how I went from having no self esteem to actually feeling really good in my own skin, which is, I didn't even know actually that was possible, because it's not like I had that experience and then I lost it. I never had that experience in my life up until that point. That's what made me passionate to help other people. And in speaking, what I realize is me sharing my story, that there might be somebody in the back of the room that, one, can't even acknowledge, doesn't even want to ask questions about their situation. Because I know when I ended up in the domestic violence relationships that I was in, they weren't as bad as the abuse that I had as a child. So I didn't consider it to be real abuse. because I justified it because it's like, oh, well, it's not as bad as it was. And I know that there are other people in that situation and they don't want to ask anybody. They're way too ashamed to tell anybody. There's people in situations that they're not ready to speak up. But if I share my story and I'm willing to be honest, it helps them to feel seen. It helps them not to feel alone. And I just realized that that is so powerful and that is worth any embarrassment, any shame that I feel to know that I can impact somebody in that way.
Wow, thanks for sharing all that. And that totally makes sense now why you're a relationship coach and why one of the most important relationships you work with is yourself. Most of my clients are kind of the same way. They came from an abusive background, usually as a child. And that really goes to your point of the importance of self-esteem, because when you don't have it, you're attracting people who are going to trash it. And you show up as a very different person when you're confident and fulfilled and really trust yourself. And then you attract the people who are going to celebrate that. Um, and
Yeah, and also your nervous system, like this is the thing that I had to learn is your nervous system is wired to feel comfortable in what you're used to, not what is good for you. So if you grew up, it doesn't have to be an abusive home, but just say like, you know, your parents were fighting all the time and there was chaos in your home, and that's what feels comfortable to your nervous system. So if you meet somebody actually who's stable and loving and kind, your nervous system is going to feel like there's something wrong with that person, and you're going to turn towards the person who's bringing out those feelings, and the whole time you're trying to run away from that because you know that you don't want that intellectually, you don't want that, but your nervous system is getting pulled towards that situation because that's what it's used to, and you have to learn how to regulate your nervous system so that you can actually feel comfortable and feel attracted to healthy. Otherwise you're just going to keep repeating the same pattern.
Wow, that's so true and so deep. And I just learned a lot about that stuff in the past year. I took a trauma course from the International Association of Trauma Recovery Coaches. Not necessarily to become a trauma coach, but to be able to start handling all of my own trauma, all of my own unresolved trauma. And
And I think that, I mean, I think it's incredible that you did that, and I think it's so amazing because even if that's not, if you don't want to be a trauma recovery coach, I mean, I think it's just so important to be trauma informed, and I do think that that is a little bit of the dark side of the coaching industry, is that there are so many people out there that are not trauma informed, and people can become more traumatized by going through coaching with somebody who isn't trauma informed.
so true. I think so many people aren't trauma informed because unfortunately it seems to be kind of a newer science. Um, Part of that, and we could spend the whole podcast talking about trauma. Honestly, we could do another one just about this, but I feel like it got swept under the rug so often because the people that would see it were the people that needed traumatized people to get their jobs done. In I think it was the book, The Body Keeps the Score, is when I think he was talking about how there are studies from generals and other leaders in the military that noticed all these things like post-traumatic stress disorder and were trying to deal with it. But the part of the problem was, in dealing with it, your soldiers weren't as angry and ready to go out there and do what they had to do as soldiers. So nobody ever put time into trying to figure it out. And now it's thankfully, that's one of the things that I feel like has really blossomed because of the internet age, is that more people are able to collaborate and study, and it's getting out there. And I've, coaches, therapists, school teachers, parents, I think we all need to be more trauma informed.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I also think the other driving force that still keeps like people stuck in that is that I think capitalism is also built on exploiting people's trauma, right? So there's a part of capitalism that is against people healing, because you're not going to be as consumeristic if you heal, because you're not trying to fill a void anymore.
So it's a good thing that we have people out there like you that are helping people heal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And yeah, and it's not, and I'm not saying that you need to be a minimalist or anything like that, but it's just that I think everyone that has had trauma can attest to different things that they grabbed onto that, you know, in an attempt to heal their trauma, that didn't do that.
The other thing that I love about your story is you basically had what I call radical self-responsibility. At one point, you decided that you weren't a victim. You're like, I'm not a victim. I have this issue. I have low self-confidence. I went through these things. I had these experiences in these relationships, but I'm going to change me first. And then as a result of changing yourself, you were able to change your relationships, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something that I actually get a lot with, like, people sometimes when they come to have a first conversation with me, right? And they will say things to me like, it's not fair and I didn't deserve this, and I will fully agree with them. And I'll say, that's true. But this identity that you've created around that, is it serving you? Because if you want to be in this place where you want to you want to hold on to all of that, and you want to live in that identity, it's absolutely your choice and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're seeking a coach, it's because you want something different, and you're gonna have to, I mean, this is something that my grandmother has always said to me, is that um you have to lose something to gain something. So because it's, and essentially you have to make space for that. So you have to make space the for your healed identity to come in, right? So you have to make that mental shift. Like, even if you don't feel it, you have to at least make a decision. Okay, I'm going to now identify as a survivor rather than a victim, right? And because that's what's going to help propel you to take the actions that you need to take. Because if you're still too attached and you're holding on to that identity of a victim, you won't be able to take the steps that you need to do. You won't be able to do the work that you have to do to start healing that. So you really have to be willing to let go of that and create the space for your new identity.
Very true. Now, at the beginning, you said you're an author and a speaker. Um, do you feel like talking about that? Like, what kinds of things do you speak about? What kinds of books have you written or are writing?
Yeah, so I've written I've co-authored two books, and one is called Healing and Growth, and one is called Our Yellow Brick Road. So in Healing and Growth, I wrote a chapter about overcoming infidelity, because I was married, and my husband actually had a child with somebody else while we were married. So it was like a whole other
Wow.
level of trauma that happened there. But I write about my experience, and then what I learned from it in that book. And then in Our Yellow Brick Road, that's a really special book, actually. Um, it's the compilation of 10 of us who are all inspirational speakers who have gone through tremendous things in our lives, and it's some of our top speeches that were really well received, that we compiled together and wrote into a chapter. So uh, I think that that's a really special book, and it's something that would actually resonate with so many people, because it's not just my story in there, it's so many different people's stories. There's 10 of us, and there's a different aspect that you can resonate with each person. So I really love that book. And right now, what I'm in the process of writing is a teaching memoir. So I haven't I think I've decided on the title, but I'm about halfway through writing the book. But I don't want to share the title because I'm not 100% sure that that's the title I want to go with yet. But it is coming out in April, and that is where I go really in depth into my personal story, but also how I overcame all of the things that I overcame, the steps that I took. So it's really, I wanted it to be tangible, hands-on guide for people and something that is affordable, right? Because coaching is obviously going to be more expensive because it requires more of my personal time and my energy. But I wanted to provide something for someone perhaps that doesn't have the same sort of resources that they could take away and that they could really start implementing their own healing.
That's beautiful. Well, I look forward to hearing about your book in April. I'm excited for
Yeah.
you. Um, so I love that you're a love and confidence coach. You had said that you help people step into the world as the grandest, most confident you. So tell us how it works. Somebody decides, you know what, my self-esteem is in the toilet, and I got to start working with Navi right now. I'm ready to invest. Tell us what the process is. How do they reach you? What does the process look like?
Yeah. So I always do a connection call with people in the beginning because I just think it's really, really important that they feel connected to me personally and that I feel like things are in alignment. And the thing is, I also have a lot of other coaches that I know. So if I feel like someone else might be a better fit for someone, I'm not afraid to refer them to somebody else. But I think it's really important that we're in alignment because what I always tell people is there's more than one path that you can take to get to a destination. And going down the path with me is not the only way. But if you want me to be your guide, then you have to be ready to follow me. You have to be invested in what I'm saying. And you can't be, twisting and turning in different directions. There's a mistake I made when I first started coaching. I had a client that we would have a session and then she was also following 2 to 3 other coaches and their advice was contradictory with mine, and I wouldn't say that it was wrong because like I said, there's different paths you can take to get to a destination, but doing those things at the same time just it didn't help. She was just spinning her wheels in circles. So the first thing I always do is I want to make sure that I do a connection call with somebody just to make sure that we're a really good fit. And if I don't feel like we are, then I'm always happy to refer them to somebody who I think perhaps might be a better fit for them. And then we sort of make a plan as to what they're wanting, right? So sometimes I have people that are coming to me and they're in a relationship and they want to fix the relationship that they're in. Sometimes people come to me and just their confidence is low and they want to only work on their confidence. Sometimes I have people that want to work on it in relation to dating so that they can become more confident and attractive in that regard. And I also work with other entrepreneurs who want to become more magnetic and attractive. So it really, we start with coming up with a plan for what they're looking for. And of course, that can progress and change. And so we can set tangible goals of how we're going to get there because I think having a plan is really important. And then how I structure my sessions is for my private coaching. For the first 4 weeks, we meet once a week, and then we meet every other week to allow time for implementation. And that means that people end up working with me for 5 months. And I think that that's sort of the minimum amount of time you need to really facilitate change because it's not, these patterns that you have aren't going to change right away. And I don't like to overwhelm people with exercises and things that they're doing. I want to give them time to gradually build habits so that these things can stay with them. And the one thing that I always tell people is self love is a practice. So once you leave and you stop working with me, you'll be in a good place. You'll be in a place where you're feeling good about yourself. But if you don't keep up the work, it won't stay that way. Even for myself, it's a practice. I have a self-love practice in the morning, at night. There are things that I do and they help keep me in the state that I'm in. And so I always like to let people know that it's something that you're going to have to keep up because it's not like, you could work out with a trainer and you could get fit and get get into your ideal body, but if you don't maintain the workouts it won't stay that way either. So it's the same thing when it comes to your mindset as well.
That's a really good point. Yeah. So what does it look like when you're a confident person who really loves and values themselves?
When you're a confident person that really loves and values themselves, you are able to show up in the world in a way where you're unbothered by so many things. And what I mean is that when things aren't in alignment with you. So let's just say if it comes to the dating process, right? If someone isn't in alignment with you, you're not getting upset because you're not taking it personally. Like if someone just says to you, okay, I'm not interested in you, it doesn't mean that you're not going to feel sad for a moment because you're human and that's okay. But you're just realizing, okay, like I'm sad that this connection with this person didn't pan out, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with the alignment, and they're allowed to feel that way. And it doesn't, everything doesn't become this thing that you're taking in that makes you bitter. When it comes to your confidence and it comes to your business and other areas of your life, this means that you trust yourself, you trust your intuition, you believe in your ideas. Even when they don't make sense to anybody else, you have the courage to go out there and do what you need to do and show up. And just by showing up, you are going to create magic.
That sounds like magic. So is there any other, are there any other pearls of wisdom that you have that you'd like to share, or anything else you'd like to talk about in our time today?
Yeah, so one thing I always like to say to people is because sometimes they'll listen to a podcast and they'll think, okay, I haven't been, I've been blaming everyone or I've been stuck in this victim identity or I've been doing this, right? And it's like, because, when you're already in that place where you're low, you're going to become more critical when you start hearing things. You don't know what you don't know until you know it. And you're never going to come to a place of self love from a place of judgment. So instead of, if you hear anything, if you take in anything, instead of taking that and thinking, okay, I'm going to criticize myself or use this as ammunition to beat myself up more, don't do that because it's not going to get you to where you want to go. Just understand that, you were open to receive. And so if there was something that you were able to take away, or that that you were able to listen to this, that you were able to come across this because you were open to receive it, and that means that you're already heading in the right direction towards that self-love and confidence. And be open to that, be proud of yourself for that instead of beating yourself up.
That was really great advice. At the end of my shows, I like to have what I call a call to action. So I'm wondering if you have a call to action for people out there.
Yeah, so I always like to tell people for 7 days, try to keep a journal and like do an evaluation every single day, right? And see if you can go 7 days without saying something negative to yourself. And if you can, see how it changes things. Even if you're not, because in the beginning, there's certain things that are just habit, right? So you're used, and if you catch yourself, if you bring yourself to awareness in those moments, you're going to realize, one, if you keep a journal, how many times you're doing that in a day, and it's going to shock you. And if you can just start to shift that, even if you're not in a place where you're able to say something positive to yourself yet, if you're not ready for that, if you can just stop, instead of, if you make a mistake and saying, oh my gosh, I'm so dumb, or I look fat in this, or whatever it is, we all do this in different ways, right? And I used to do this. And the thing that I can tell you is that the more awareness that you create around this, you will change this. Because I used to have a negative thought every time I looked in the mirror, every time I passed by a mirror, every time I saw myself, I would have a negative thought. I can tell you it's the opposite now. I think something kind about myself every single time I walk by a mirror, and I notice something positive about myself because I was able to switch that around. But it just starts with the awareness. So my call to action is just start to bring awareness to how you're speaking to yourself, keep track of it, and notice how your life starts to change as you start to just, intercept those moments.
That's a fantastic exercise. And I think tying it into what we were talking about in the beginning is to not give up. Because if
Yeah.
you're used to telling yourself negative things about yourself, you're probably going to do it 100 times. And so if you do the journal prompt the first day and you're like, oh, I sucked. I didn't say anything positive to myself the whole day, and you just stop, it's not going to change. But maybe today you did it 100 times, tomorrow you'll do it 97, the next day 87, the next day 50, and before you know it, it'll be down to 0.
And the thing is, like, this is like what's amazing about this, that let's just say, okay, you said 100 negative things to yourself today, and then, but you brought that awareness, you start to intercept them, and you said 80 the next day. You're already going to start to feel better. Like, that's the thing. It doesn't have to, like, you don't have to eliminate that completely to feel better. Even if you were to half the negative things you say to yourself, you're already going to start to feel better. And that is actually then going to be your motivation to keep going.
That's so true. Well, I really loved having you on the show and having this conversation with you. I think we talked about some really great things. And there's probably a few things that we could have talked a lot longer about, um, that we just kind of glossed over. But I just
Yeah,
really
I
wanted
mean,
to offer some gratitude and say thanks.
yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation. And to all of your listeners, thank you so much for listening and being present for this conversation.
And I'll put all of the links to Navi's website and books and her contact information in the show notes. So reach out, spread the love, gain confidence, work with Navi. Take Hey everybody, I hope you really enjoyed that episode with Navi. We had some great conversation about self-love, popped in some of that trauma, all good stuff. Don't forget to follow and please share this episode with at least 2 other people to help us all grow. We need more positive stuff in the world. Take care.